Good morning and welcome to today's webinar on renewable natural gas, a fuel that can potentially make your fleet even greener. We're so happy to have you here today. Our hosts for today's session are myself, Ben Moore. I am sustainability leader at RS&H. And at RS&H, I have been a consultant to the North Florida Clean Fuels Coalition for about 10 years. My co-host is Alicia Lopez. She is Clean Cities Coordinator for the South Florida Clean Fuels Coalition. So we have both North and South Clean Fuels Coalitions represented on today's call. And we are so happy to introduce our panel of experts who we've assembled for this session. Sam Lair is Manager of Sustainability and Markets Policy at the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas. He'll be speaking first, followed by Ernie Politzer. Ernie is Senior Engineer with First Environment. And finally, Dave Clevenger. Dave manages the fleet for City Furniture and is a renewable natural gas user. Today's objectives are simple. We hope you leave the program with an understanding of what renewable natural gas is. You'll hear it referred to as biogas, or RNG as well during today's program. You'll leave today also understanding what its benefits are. And then finally, we hope you'll have some understanding about how you can use it in your fleet. Before we get started, a few words about the North Florida Clean Fuels Coalition. It's been active for over 10 years. Back in 2013, we put together the Alternative Fuels Master Plan, which has been guiding our activities since. Those activities have been significant. The coalition has invested over $6.5 million in infrastructure and vehicles projects in the North Florida region. Several of them have greatly advanced use of natural gas fuels in the region. Projects include helping the Jacksonville Transportation Authority transition its transit bus fleet from diesel to natural gas. They now operate over 100 CNG vehicles. As part of that project, 2 CNG fueling stations were developed, including one, thanks to the support of the Clean Fuels Coalition, is accessible to the public. We've also supported CNG fleet transitions in St. Johns County. And we have been involved in transitioning the city of Jacksonville's refuse fleet to CNG. It's not just vehicles on road too. The coalition has helped Florida East Coast Railways experiment and then ultimately transition the entirety of its rolling stock to LNG. So now we have LNG trains running up and down the East Coast, north to south. These efforts were recognized by the Department of Energy in 2016 when our coalition was designated as a Clean Cities Coalition. And that provides DOE resources to our coalition to bring programs like this to you. We also were the first coalition in Florida to receive FHWA, Florida Highway Administration designation for our alternative fuels corridors. And this means that the roads and highways in North Florida have enough alternative fueling infrastructure along them for drivers to feel comfortable that they can use alternative fuels along their length and have access to refueling infrastructure. We've gone on and done feasibility studies for the public fleets in Clay and Nassau counties to help them understand where it has made economic and environmental and social sense to invest in clean fuels. And we continually look at the gaps in the infrastructure for the various fuels along our roadways and find ways to plug those gaps. To sum it all up, our efforts have resulted in supporting over 8,000 alternative fuel vehicles on the road in North Florida, displacing over 86 million gallons of gasoline or diesel fuel, and avoiding over 102 million tons of greenhouse gases since 2016. So truly, this is one of the most significant sustainability and resilience efforts ongoing in North Florida. Also, before we get started, some definitions. We're going to be talking a lot today about LNG and CNG. Both are natural gas fuels. So natural gas today powers about 30% of the United States economy, but only about, well, actually less than 1% is used in vehicles. And as a fuel, it is cleaner than gasoline or diesel. It emits less greenhouse gas emissions, less criteria air pollutants, which is part of why the Clean Fuels Coalition attempts to educate fleets about its use because of its benefits. So LNG, or liquefied natural gas, is simply natural gas in a liquid form. It's purified and super cooled to negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a lot colder than the weather has been here in Florida. It's used in heavy duty alternative fuel vehicles, and significantly, it's used in off-road vehicles like ships and trains. And I already mentioned the trains, the Florida East Coast Railway uses it in North Florida for its trains. It's also used in North Florida by Tote Maritime and Crowley in 4 ocean-going vessels that travel between Jacksonville and Puerto Rico. Compressed natural gas is simply natural gas squeezed down to about 1% of its natural volume, meaning it is pressurized in tanks at 3,600 PSI, which is a tremendous amount of pressure. It is used in light, medium, and heavy duty alternative fuel vehicles. I mentioned many of the fleets that are using it around the city. 2 private fleets that I didn't mention yet are Champion Brands, a beverage distributor in North Florida, and Waste Pro, which is a refuse hauler in the region. So you may have inferred already that we have significant LNG and CNG use in North Florida, and that is certainly the case. This graph shows the extreme growth in use of natural gas as a transportation fuel in our region since 2016, going from about 6 million gaseous gallon equivalent to over 38 in just 5 years. So dramatic growth in on-road transportation, growth in rail, growth in the maritime sector, and we expect this growth to continue, which is why our discussion of renewable natural gas is so relevant to our region. To put the use of natural gas as a transportation fuel in context with the other alternative fuels, this graph shows all the alternative fuels that we are aware of in use in North Florida from 2016 to 2020. And if you look at this graph, you can see that this yellow bar is the off-road LNG use in our region, which is dominating the mix. This is the maritime, and this is the rail use of LNG. So you can see they're big users of LNG. On-road LNG is the orange block right under the yellow, and these are some of the fleets like UPS or Raven Transport who are using LNG in their tractor trailers. And then the blue bar below that is the CNG use. I've mentioned some of the users of CNG, but if you sum the yellow, the orange, and the blue, you see that natural gas as a fuel dominates the alternative fuel use in our region, which is not to say that we don't have significant electricity use as an alternative fuel and significant propane use as an alternative fuel in the region. We do, but the natural gas use as a fuel is so large and so significant. So now that you have a sense of how significant the effort here in North Florida is regarding alternative fuels and what a big role natural gas plays in it, it's time to bring our experts into the conversation so that you can learn about RNG and what its role might be here in North Florida and in South Florida in the future. So we're going to start with Sam Lair, and Sam is Manager of Sustainability and Markets Policy for the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas. And Sam is going to help us understand RNG from first principles, and then also get into some of the policy questions that shape its role in the economy now and ways that we can expect it to grow in importance going forward. Take it away, Sam.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Good morning, everyone. And thanks to the Florida Clean Fuels Coalition teams for putting on this event today and for inviting us to speak. My name is Sam Lair. As Ben said, I'm a policy manager with the RNG Coalition, and today I'll be providing you all with an overview of the environmental benefits and policy picture surrounding biologically derived renewable gases, focused, of course, on renewable natural gas or RNG. Next slide, please. So generally speaking, raw biogas is the primary starting point for renewable gases that we are focused on today. So biogas is sourced from landfills or diverted organics, wastewater treatment plants, agricultural operations through a process called anaerobic digestion, which involves the breakdown of organic material in the absence of oxygen. So that biogas is roughly 55% methane when it comes out raw, the rest being mostly CO2 and a small amount of other chemical constituents. So creating RNG from that biogas requires purifying it to pretty much only methane, high 90s% wise, at which point it can be used as a substitute for geologic natural gas in the existing gas network. So to just, sort of do an overview of this chart, right, you can see on the left, organic waste would be produced perhaps at someone's home. You would then collect that waste either by a garbage truck like pictured here, or you can divert that waste and collect it separately to a separate anaerobic digester. The biogas is created at the digester and then upgraded close to that digester or that landfill, which acts as a digester, into RNG. From that, we have fuel, power generation, or direct use in folks' homes. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons why this is such a crucial time for our industry hinges on the need to shepherd in really a new generation of waste management technologies, which from a climate standpoint will necessarily be focused on methane emissions. As we all know, this year's IPCC report was very clear on this topic and included methane capture and recovery from solid waste management as an important strategy. We've also seen explicit commitments from the UN to reduce methane, which in the US has taken the form of a methane regulation, which is pending from EPA. And that rule includes reducing leakage and venting from oil and gas operations, increasing landfill gas capture rate to 70%, and rewarding emission reductions in the agricultural sector. And so here's where we really see an opportunity for our industry to live up to its potential in abating methane emissions, a mantle we've been carrying for years. Next slide, please. So pursuant to that goal and to the goal of realizing a sustainable profile for organic waste more broadly, including improving human health impacts and the circularization of our economy, RNG Coalition has established our Sustainable Methane Abatement and Recycling Timeline, or SMART initiative, in which we aim to capture and control the methane produced by all 43,000 aggregated organic waste sites in North America by 2050. Next slide, please. So we're working to accomplish that with our more than 350 members throughout North America, advocating for the development and use of RNG, renewable hydrogen, and biogas to electricity produced from all sustainable feedstocks, created by all sustainable and competing technologies, and for all sustainable end-use applications. So we really try to take a broad technology agnostic approach to promoting RNG and the associated energy sources that we can produce from that. Formed in 2011, our focus has historically been on the use of AD to produce RNG, with our work expanding to encompass those other technologies. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, we know there's significant value in the use of biologically derived feedstocks across sectors. This includes the use of RNG and increasingly electricity and renewable hydrogen as a transportation fuel for corporate, industrial, clean energy buyers and utilities alike. Given that bioenergy provides the only pathways to carbon negative energy, especially when dealing in methane mitigation and in tandem with carbon capture and storage technologies, which are growing, our industry presents a unique value proposition, which will allow us to really enable negative emissions in the long run. And so we've seen significant interaction within the AD, the anaerobic digestion industry, between these types of partners. For example, those who are concerned with the carbon footprint of their food waste, seeking anaerobic digestion to RNG as a solution, and pairing that with energy needs in the transportation sector, which is why we're here today. So that really extends to any number of feedstock, energy carrier, and end use applications that you can imagine. Next slide, please. So for the purpose of today's meeting, we'll be focusing on the transportation sector. And I think it's important to begin that conversation with a discussion of the broader environmental and human health goals in the transportation sector. So importantly, when it comes to near zero natural gas vehicles, we're able to achieve a 90% reduction in NOx and a 99% reduction in SOx compared to diesel with the use of a low emission, near zero emission natural gas vehicle. And this is significant because, in tandem with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, criteria pollutants also have an effect on human health. So this technology means that RNG fueled NGVs have an important role to play in the transition to cleaner vehicles, especially in the heavy duty sector. And given that zero emission technologies in these sectors and the infrastructure needed to fuel them are still largely unavailable. Next slide, please. So when it comes to greenhouse gas reduction through RNG, there are two ways to assess the carbon intensity of the fuel, either on a life cycle basis or at the point of combustion. At the point of combustion, RNG is essentially carbon neutral, with the exception of the greenhouse gas effects from a small amount of criteria pollutants, which are generally rounded down to zero. So here it's important to understand that the CO2 emitted during the combustion of RNG is carbon neutral, because it's biogenic, which means it came from plants instead of under the ground, and therefore does not add additional carbon to the atmosphere. And so I think that's really a foundational fact about biofuels and about RNG, especially RNG, since it's derived from waste. So I would just say that's a good point to keep in mind when we're thinking about the greenhouse gas emissions from these technologies. So the other way to assess carbon intensity, especially in transportation markets, is on a life cycle basis. And this is really what we're seeing, arising in these different LCFS, low carbon fuel standard programs that incentivize these fuels in different states. So that method takes into account all production steps from feedstock production to fuel transport to end use. And in that case, RNG ranges from low carbon, which is around a 55 CI score. That would be something like a basic landfill project. But it can also be carbon negative, reaching into the negative 300s and lower, which occurs when you mitigate methane emissions from, say, a dairy farm. So those higher CI scores in the landfill sector are due to electricity and fuel usage in the upgrading process, which they count under that lump score. And so the lower CI scores, again, are due to methane destruction or could be achieved through carbon capture or both. So that's really an important thing to consider when we're talking about what makes RNG an extremely important near-term climate mitigation tool. And the good news is that we've reached 100% NGV saturation in California as of last year and 53% saturation nationally as of 2020. So I'll talk about why that is in the next couple of slides. Next, please. Onto a bit about the policies driving our industry. First and foremost, US EPA's Renewable Fuel Standard, or RFS, has been a major force for RNG and other biofuels in the transport sector. Under this program, EPA sets biofuel blending targets as a certain percentage of overall US fuel use. And so RNG and other fuels dispensed or blended in the US generate environmental attributes called renewable identification numbers, or RINs, as part of that process. And those RINs are separated from the physical gas and traded for compliance. And that's really a commonality among pretty much all renewable energy incentive programs, including renewable electricity and among voluntary buyers for those energy sources. So this is a very important concept throughout our industry, among these different programs, including the state level programs, which I'll get into in a second, and throughout the general renewable energy space. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more on the federal side. We're currently in the midst of some potentially unprecedented developments for climate within the US federal government via the Build Back Better Act. So I'm sure that in one way or another, you're all at least aware of the Build Back Better Act, which originally passed the House in November, and it's currently under consideration by the Senate. So as of now, it looks like various provisions must be cut for this to have any chance of passing. And we're, hoping that means the climate provisions can stay. Within that act for our industry includes a biogas property tax credit, which would allow cleaning and conditioning equipment to qualify under the Section 48 Renewable Energy Investment Tax Credit, a clean hydrogen tax credit, which is importantly technology neutral, lowering of the threshold for the carbon capture and sequestration tax credit, and an extension of the 50-cent alternative fuel tax credit. Next slide, please. So in addition to these federal developments, there have been a flurry of legislative and regulatory developments related generally to policies which promote decarbonization and clean fuels on the state and provincial levels in North America. One of the strongest policies for our industry is the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, also known as the Clean Fuel Standard, which was first implemented in California and has driven substantial growth in our industry throughout the US. So this is a leading program for what I mentioned previously, which is life cycle carbon intensity scoring, which gives us credit for reducing methane emissions, and therefore has been a major driver for us. Notably, Washington State passed legislation this year, which began the implementation of a clean fuel standard, operating in tandem with state and provincial level programs in California, Oregon, and British Columbia. This move completes what has been coined the Clean Fuels Coast, and is a very significant step as RNG Coalition has been actively working on supporting that legislation for years. So we're very happy about that. Outside of the West Coast, New York remains an important state where a clean fuel standard has been considered for some time, and legislation has been introduced this year. Minnesota is increasingly drawing attention as a Midwestern leader, which is looking to pass a clean fuel standard, having introduced the Future Fuels Act both last year and this year. And New Mexico, which would be the first oil and gas state to enact a clean fuel standard, saw a bill make significant progress last year and is currently making its way through their legislature this year. And finally, Canada is working on the regulatory side on implementing their clean fuel standard across the country on a federal level. So these policies are really important because they've been the largest driver for us, layered with the EPA renewable fuel standard in terms of incentivizing methane mitigation and supplying renewable natural gas for use in NGVs. And as we look ahead, we expect pathways for RNG to electricity and RNG to hydrogen to increase under these programs when more fleets begin to adopt those technologies. Next slide, please. In addition to the transportation sector, it's worth discussing how RNG is being increasingly looked at for applications in stationary sectors, which are currently served through natural gas pipeline infrastructure, including heavy industry, electricity generation, and direct procurement by energy utilities, as illustrated here. So there's really immense diversity among these existing and emerging state level programs. But as you can see, regulations to enable RNG are being enacted across North America. Next slide, please. So the bills listed here are just a few legislative highlights from the past year, which will enable RNG procurement by utilities. Since we're focused on transportation today, I'll leave this for you folks, but wanted to definitely mention Florida's RNG legislation, SB 896, which passed last year and established a statutory definition for renewable natural gas and the ability for utilities to recover procurement costs potentially if approved by the PUC. So with utilities procuring the gas, this of course lends itself to non-transportation use, and there is a limited supply. However, it's possible that the utilities would be supportive of transportation use because it would give them the ability to then monetize RNG under the renewable fuel standard, as long as they're able to dispense that gas into the transportation sector, which includes Florida, anywhere in the US. And I know Ernie will go into a little bit more about that program in his presentation. Next, please. So additionally, I think it's important to highlight the developments we've seen in support of voluntary RNG procurement. This again really doesn't apply to the transportation sector because those are covered by mandatory procurement programs. But really what this does is creates a sustainability standard for RNG. And the reason why I included it here is that it shows, we're really developing this industry on all fronts and establishing new guidelines and new partners So, it's an exciting time, and there's a lot to read in all of this if you're interested in the different sustainability aspects of RNG and sort of how people are viewing that. Next slide, please. And so finally, I've outlined here some key directional considerations with an eye toward the future of our industry. I think this is just an important thing to mention, right, in terms of the overall benefit of RNG and what we can do moving into the future. So to start, it's important to consider how RNG and other bioenergy resources can ultimately move toward full carbon neutrality, or more likely carbon negativity on a life cycle basis. So even those feedstocks, which are currently low carbon due to the in-process energy use, can be carbon neutral on a life cycle basis once those process energies are converted to clean energy. So as the grid becomes cleaner, and once we're able to utilize more biogas in actually upgrading RNG, which uses conventional natural gas as part of that process currently, we're moving quickly, I think, towards carbon neutrality. And then employing carbon capture really allows our technology to serve as a direct air capture for carbon. So overall, that would be on the waste stream in the process. I know this is a little bit weedy, but overall, that means you could have really across the board carbon negative RNG for your fleet, even in the electricity and hydrogen sectors once those expand. So very importantly, item number 3, how do we continue to use these waste-derived energy resources to improve conditions across the waste management industry? I think one of the really unique value propositions for RNG is that we are handling 2 issues at once, right? And so waste-derived bioenergy, again, presents a unique value proposition in that we are part of the climate and broader environmental solution across the waste and energy sectors. And poor organic waste management in some cases has been incorrectly used against the energy resources, such as RNG, that are derived from it. I think that's a common criticism that you'll see. So, we're really looking at how can we better quantify those ancillary benefits that we facilitate, and what can we standardize to make sure that those improvements are widespread and as far reaching as possible. So next slide, please. This is my last one. And for any questions that we don't get to today, please feel to reach out to me by email or by phone as provided here. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. That was very educational. I want to remind folks who are on the webinar today to type your questions into the chat. You can do it at the bottom of your screen. We're monitoring your questions, and we're going to be throwing them back to the speakers when we get to the Q&A at the end of our session today. So it's real easy. Put your questions in the chat. We see some of you doing it. Sam, thank you so much. So next we have on our slate, Ernie Politzer. And Ernie is a licensed professional engineer with First Environment, where he heads their renewable fuels program. Since 2009, Mr. Politzer has worked in the renewable fuel industry and has performed hundreds of engineering reviews and quality assurance audits for the EPA's Renewable Fuel Standard program, which you just heard a little bit about from Sam. He's worked on all kinds of biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, and RNG facilities in the United States, Canada, and Europe. He's also a lead verifier for the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard program and has done modeling and facility registration under that program. He's performed a number of technical feasibility studies for renewable fuel facilities as part of investment due diligence or USDA-backed loan guarantees. So Ernie's got a lot of experience in this space, and he's going to help us dig a little deeper into this question of, what is RNG, what are its benefits, and how can you reap some of those benefits. So Ernie, I'm going to stop my share here and let you deliver your slide deck to our audience.
Okay. Let's give it a try here. Share. All right. What are you seeing? Good, Ben?
Looks good, Ernie.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for participating in today's program. I'll just repeat what Ben said. I encourage questions. That's the real value of these kind of presentations, is addressing your questions. So please use the chat, and Ben will ask the questions at the end of the presentation. Real quick, people are probably wondering what these two pictures are that you're looking at, and the one on the right here is a landfill gas well outside the city of Atlanta. And then over here on the left, this is a gas treatment facility in Dallas, Texas. So these are kind of things I'll be discussing today. Okay, so my agenda, it's really kind of pretty basic RNG 101, if you will. First, we're going to go over biogas sources and the gas treatment of those, of the biogas. Then get into the EPA Renewable Fuel Standard Program. I know Sam touched on that, and again, I'll kind of highlight a little bit on that too. And then the last few slides will be this kind of pathway map that will go from feedstock to fuel to the environmental credit, and how it all kind of works together and the major stakeholders that are involved with a RNG project. So let's go into the major and minor sources of biogas. And the major ones we're touched on again a little bit. The three major ones in the RFS program and the state programs too are landfills, wastewater plants, and agricultural farms and the manure from those. And just to give you some rough feel, I mean, landfills are still the biggest, both in terms of the number of RNG facilities and the volume of gas produced by them. However, agricultural is the fastest growing, really growing fast in the past couple of years. And that's been due primarily to that California Low Carbon Fuel Standard Program. Sam mentioned how it's skewed to agricultural. For the RFS program, the environmental credit is the same for all three of these, but in the California program, the LCFS credit is much greater for the agricultural. Now, on top of these major biogas sources, we also have a couple of minor ones. For separate MSW, it's a difficult feedstock to use. It's not impossible. I'm working on one right now in California, but it is difficult to develop the proper feedstock sources in the kind of quantities you need to make it economical. So let's move on to this slide. This is a very busy slide, lots of obviously pictures here. So we got a few things to go through. So if you can focus on the upper left-hand corner, this shows a landfill, gas well, like the one that I showed you on the cover. And, the primary treatment of this gas is shown here. Now, this gas is typically, this raw gas is typically 55 to 60% methane, 35 to 40% carbon dioxide. And many landfills and wastewater plants just do this primary treatment, just flare the gas. The volume's too low, or it's just too expensive for them to treat it any further. Now, the secondary treatment produces what most people call a medium BTU fuel called biogas. And for decades, and to this day, biogas is used directly for electric and heat, electricity generation and heat. And there are some renewable energy credits that are associated for this use. However, what we're really here today to talk about is the advanced treatment to make renewable natural gas. And this advanced treatment generates this high BTU fuel called renewable natural gas. And this can be injected directly into a natural gas pipeline or used directly in a CNG vehicle. And this is the fuel that generates the environmental credit that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. Now, I'm as guilty as the next person in using biogas and renewable natural gas interchangeably. But this shows the difference between the two. If anybody ever asks you what's the difference between biogas and renewable natural gas, you now know. Okay, so let's go through the EPA RFS program. I realize Sam talked about it, but let me go through it here. And the Renewable Natural Gas Program was passed by Congress in 2007, excuse me, to produce and blend renewable fuels into the U.S. transportation fuel market. And the way they do that is there's an annual renewable volume obligation or a policy that sets the volumes for the different fuel codes in the RFS program. And the overall volume is 20.77 billion gallons of fuel. with the vast majority of that being for ethanol. In comparison, the RNG volume is only 0.77 billion gallons. So that's less than 5% of the total. Now, that RIN that you've heard about actually is an acronym, and it stands for Renewable Identification Number. And it's a unique number assigned to each gallon of RNG that's produced, and is the environmental credit that or attribute to the fuel. And to give you some feel for the different values of the RINs, the RNG fuel code has the highest value RIN. It's over 2 times the value of our other renewable fuel codes like biodiesel. So that's the reason, one of the reasons for the interest in RNG and the growth in the industry is the higher value fuel for this higher value RIN for this fuel. So that's a quick overview of RFS. And now I'm going to go into this mapping pathway that I was, had in my agenda there. And this is the slide I'll be using for the rest of the presentation. Now, these first 3 boxes have been already touched on with earlier slides. I mean, we kind of talked about feedstock providers like landfills and wastewater treatment plants and agricultural farms, and they all generate this biogas, from their feedstocks. And then, you have the advanced gas treatment that can make the RNG fuel product. Now, at this point, there's 2 options for this fuel. You can have the RNG pipeline, injected into a pipeline, or you can sell it locally. Now, the more prevalent is the RNG pipeline injection, but not the only. But at many facilities, especially at landfills, the trash haulers have CNG trucks, and they will buy that fuel right there at the landfill and the gas treatment facility. I've also included on this slide some information about the renewable natural gas and the difference between that and regular natural gas. So renewable natural gas, you can see it's 96 to 98% methane. This is the chemical formula for methane, and about 1 to 3% CO2. So you can see how this gas treatment system has taken that raw biogas, which was 35 to 40% CO2, and reduced it down to a very low amount. The heating value is about 970 to 990 BTUs per standard cubic foot. Compare that to regular natural gas, the pipeline natural gas, which is typically 85 to 90% methane, about less than 1% CO2, but the heating value is over 1,000. So if anybody's curious about how the pipeline natural gas can have a lower methane content but a higher heating value, feel free to ask your question in the chat. Now, looking at these 2 gases, you may not think that these are big differences between them, but the pipeline companies, these are big differences, and they are very strict on the gas quality for renewable natural gas, and they have analyzers on these pipelines connecting into them, and they are analyzing for these parameters for methane and CO2, along with other ones like nitrogen, oxygen, water, and hydrogen sulfide. And they are very strict on the quality of the renewable natural gas that goes into their pipeline. So we'll move on to this next slide, and this shows the next steps of the contractual selling of the renewable natural gas to CNG end users down here. Again, it could be either this local CNG sales or the CNG user down here. Now, one of the reasons the pipeline injection is the more prevalent is because of what's called equivalency. And that is because RNG can be injected into the pipeline at one point right near the gas treatment facility, and then an equivalent volume is sold from another pipeline anywhere in the US. So that makes a big difference. This allows the RNG buyers to be buying gas from anywhere in the US. What's not shown on this slide is the additional environmental credit associated with RNG if this RNG is sold into California, Oregon, and soon Washington. While it's not shown, these state programs have a big impact on the overall RNG market. So when you're buying RNG from a pipeline, what you're really buying is this RIN credit here. the environmental attribute associated with the fuel. You're not actually buying the RNG fuel itself. Now, this next slide shows the pricing for the RIN along with the value of the actual fuel itself. Down here, this shows the price of the fuel, about $4 per million BTU. I don't know if that's the kind of the pricing that you guys are seeing. And that's based on, current Henry Hub natural gas pricing. Now, for the RIN, under the EPA's RFS formula, you get 11.73 RINs per million BTU of gas. And currently, the RIN is selling for $3.40 per RIN based on current RIN spot market pricing. So you combine these two together, the RIN pricing along with the fuel itself, and you get a total of nearly over $40 per million BTU. And so this kind of shows the value of this RIN, that it's nearly 10 times the value of the fuel itself. And without this EPA RIN and without the other state programs, these RNG facilities, would not exist. They're just not the economics for them without these environmental credits. Okay, so let's move on to the kind of the last slide here. And this shows the major stakeholders for RNG project. Now, from many of your perspective of many of you, there probably should be a fourth stakeholder, and that's the actual CNG users. But as you'll see here, I kind of lumped them together with others. So the major stakeholders for RNG project is, first off, you've got the owner of the feedstock, the landfill operator, the wastewater plant operator, et cetera. They're the ones that own the feedstock. They're the ones that are generating the biogas. Then you have what I call the project developer. And this can be a contracting company, engineering company that will come in and, contract with the owner to, build out the gas treatment plant, potentially even build the biogas, vessels, the digesters, if they're not already there. So the developer will build all this equipment here, the digesters, the gas treatment plant. They'll connect the RNG to the pipeline or build out the storage and local CNG dispensers. And then what happens is the project developer will build these plants, and many of them will continue to operate the plants once they're going. And then they'll contract with the final major stakeholder, and that's the gas marketer. And, the gas marketer is a company that handles, the connecting the RNG sales with the CNG end user, generating the RIN credits and, cashing out those credits and, retiring that RIN. And they basically handle all the, transactional work, between, associated with the RNG material, RNG gas. So if you want to buy RNG, you will need to connect with a gas marketing company. Now, based on your last slide, some of you might think that you have to pay $40+ per million BTU to get that fuel, but that's not the case. As stated, most of the value of RNG is with the RIN itself, and that's paid for by what's called the obligated parties in the RFS program. And if you're curious about who these obligated parties are, feel free to ask the question in the chat. Now, the gas marketers are looking for CNG users that want RNG fuel. And now these marketers and the developers are contracted with, they're mainly focused on California, Oregon CNG users because of the additional value from those state programs. But RNG is sold all over the country. From some of the work I've done with the utility, they were paying $13 to $15 per million BTU. And I can certainly provide names of gas marketing companies if you'd like to learn more about what it would cost to get RNG. So one final thought to finish this presentation, and that is this slide you see, the different stakeholders that I'm showing here, these aren't specified in the EPA RFS program or any of the state programs. This is just the most common setup for most RNG projects. So nothing prohibits a municipality and other stakeholders, they're working with, from combining feedstocks to generate the biogas, building a gas treatment plant, themselves, and selling all the RNG, to themselves, and keeping the RIN credit to themselves. And while that sounds complicated, there's obviously plenty of a financial incentive to do that. So that's my presentation. I appreciate everybody's time. Again, send questions to the chat, and Ben, thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak to this coalition.
Thanks, Sam. Again, very educational, and I look forward to the questions for Sam in the chat at the end here. I'm going to take back the share, and we will be folding Dave into the presentation in just a second. But I would like to first bring Alicia Lopez, our co-host, in to tell you a little bit about the Southeast Florida Clean Fuels Coalition, and then she's going to introduce Dave, and Dave's going to talk about how he's using RNG in his fleet.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. And I just wanted to go ahead and thank the North Florida Clean Fuels, our panelists, and everyone participating today to take the time out and to discuss, renewable natural gas and how much it's impacting our region. Ben, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, my name is Alicia Lopez, and I'm the coordinator for the Southeast Florida Clean Cities Coalition. And our mission is similar to the North Florida Clean Fuels Coalition, which is to reduce South Florida's, and actually the entire state of Florida's, dependence on imported oil and improve the environment and create, job opportunities as far as with the alternative fuels, the infrastructure, and the fleet maintenance. We are housed in the South Florida Regional Planning Council, which is the regional council here in South Florida. Our coalition varies a little bit different from the South Florida Regional Planning Council in that our region includes Broward, Miami-Dade, Monroe, and Palm Beach counties. And it totals about a little over 6.2 million residents in our coalition. We were established in 1994 by the DOE. And if you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Ben. And our board consists of Jeff Roth, who is the Senior Sales Director for the entire state of Florida for ChargePoint, Dave Clevenger from City Furniture, and I have this esteemed pleasure to introduce him next. And then we also have Commissioner Beamfor, who represents Broward County, and his region covers Hollywood, Florida, Hollandale Beach, Pembroke Pines, and Pembroke Park area. Next slide, Ben. And now, without further ado, I would love to introduce Dave Clevenger, who is now the Senior Vice President of Fleet and DC Maintenance. Dave has over 24 years of experience in fleet. He's been with City Furniture, and he was the initial person that began the research to converting over to an alternative fuel. And that began in about 2011, 2012. And as of today, they're one of the biggest proponents and supporters of natural gas in the region. And Dave, I would like for you to go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words there, Alicia. Dave Clevenger. I'm the Senior Vice President for City Furniture. We're a furniture distribution center here in South Florida. We currently have approximately 240 vehicles that run off either biofuel, which would be CNG primary and gasoline secondary. And then we have dedicated Class 8 vehicles that run 100% near zero engines from Cummins in our trucks there. We started our journey back in 2012. Decided the owners of the company, Keith and Kevin Koenig and Andrew, decided that we had to do something for our environment, and finding alternative fuels for our fleet was the primary objective. They gave me the objective, hey, they find something different. So we went and researched, and in 2013, we opened our first station in Tamarack. We bought 5 vehicles, CNG, and then that was supposed to be a 6 months journey. Within the first year, we had 50 vehicles that were CNG. We decided that CNG was a correct way to go. And it's been a challenge and a blessing in one. The CNG has proven to be an outstanding fuel, alternative fuel for our delivery application. In 2020, we went renewable. We worked with True Star Energy, and we decided to do a contract where we would go renewable gas coming in. I had problems with that. I was like, oh, how are we going to change from CNG to renewable and make that work? But I found no difference. It was no difference at all. Approximately 60% of our fuel is pipelined in as renewable natural gas from out of state, and there was zero difference in the performance of our vehicles from compressed natural gas to renewable natural gas. We've done over 7,425,000, actually 7,425,000 miles last year with 6% renewable natural gas without any disrupt of our fleet, mechanical wise, servicing, anything like that. I've found it to be an amazing alternative fuel, and we are trying to get 100% renewable gas into our fleet by the next couple of years. Our biggest issue is finding that renewable natural gas being piped in. I'm coming from out of state right now, and we'll just have to find a viable way in Florida to get that renewable natural gas shipped to us.
So Dave,
Yeah.
the idea we were going to, so Dave, that's a great overview of your program. And the thought what we wanted to do was just have a little conversation for the benefit of the viewers. So I have a few questions for you. And then if other folks have questions, please type them in the chat. So Dave, you talked a bit about like, so why did you go to CNG in the beginning? What was the reason? There probably were many, but you said that someone told you to go do it. Talk a little bit more about why.
No, absolutely. The Koenig family, who owns City Furniture, decided right around 2011, 2012. They were very, and we are here in South Florida. South Florida is a beautiful place to be. Our oceans, our Everglades, our everything. And the Koenig family came and said, and Keith, who is the owner of the company and CEO or president, decided to say, I want to leave something for my grandkids. And I told Keith, I said, I'm the same way, Keith. I'm a grandfather too. We had to decide a way to help the environment. We have a beautiful ocean. We have beautiful Everglades. We have beautiful. So they gave me the task of finding a different fuel system to run our fleet. I was tasked to give the best alternative to diesel. And to me, that was compressed natural gas. And so that was 11, 12, and I researched for a year and a half or so. And in 2013, in March of 2013, I opened our first compressed natural gas station here in Tamarack. And we changed, within 4 years, we were 100% turned over from diesel to compressed natural gas.
So Dave, when you had kind of freedom to look at the entire marketplace of options or alternatives to diesel, and you said compressed natural gas was the best one. Why did you what about CNG made you think that it was the best for your fleet?
Well, the carbon reduction, electric wasn't at the forefront at that time, and I may be wrong. I don't believe electric's the forefront now with the amount of energy it takes and to produce the electricity to provide for those electric vehicles. We're kind of offsetting each other. Compressed natural gas is readily available. Compressed natural gas clean coming into the and a viable asset. We have plenty of it here in the United States. Compressed natural gas engines run clean for my maintenance team, easy to work on. The exhaust coming out of those, once we're running it, 99% clean. I mean, it's just win, 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 win.
So there was a lot of
It-
investment,
it-
though, of course, in building your fueling stations. And I understand you are building some more. You obviously had to convert the vehicle or transition the vehicles. So there was a lot of investment, a lot of money put into this project. What's the payoff been?
Well, the biggest challenge was that exactly what you just said, finding the vehicle. There was 0 medium duty trucks, which we utilize for our delivery system. There was 0.0. So I had to go out and find a manufacturer that was willing to commit to build a vehicle for us. That was one of the biggest challenge. Getting that vehicle and going through the problem solving of putting a new technology into a vehicle. We had our strides there where we had problems at the beginning, but it was a continuous work together partnership with the company I went with, which was Isuzu, and it took a year or two to get it right. We'd run it, and it took a couple of years to get it right. I had to also, you have to think about your technicians to repair these vehicles. They had to learn the system. There's not a lot of schooling, not a lot of technology out there for alternative fuel, CNG. There's a plenty for diesel and natural, but nothing for alternative really. So we had to teach them. Now my crew is top notch. We this year, 2021, we won NAFA and AFA #1 green fleet in America. So it's a lot of struggle, a lot of learning in the beginning for us, but now it's easy. The advantages are vehicles are running at a 7.3 miles per gallon average. We're saving on fuel. Instead of the $3 plus almost $4 for diesel, we're running, average $1.24 a gallon now. We're getting incentives by running alternative fuels. We're getting the RINs back as stated prior. There's this advantage of cost. The maintenance cost is about half of what a diesel vehicle. I would say a little less than half what a diesel vehicle would be. So there's wins all the way around, but the biggest win, we're helping the environment.
Yeah, so you went through all this work to set up your CNG program. It's working well. You're saving money. Some might say, okay, well, you've done enough. That's good enough. Why then say, look, we want to take it to the next level. We want now renewable natural gas. How did that conversation start, and how did you start to figure out how to meet that challenge you were given?
We again, the Canadians they set a 2040 carbon neutral objective. We're going to be carbon neutral. We'll be carbon neutral way before 2040. We care about the environment. I'm pushing for 100% renewable natural gas. We're putting solar systems on every one of our buildings. We're doing everything we can to help the environment, cleaner energy, less carbon footprint.
Okay, so that's just part of the culture of City Furniture, and so you're
100%.
constantly asked to kind of push the envelope here. So how did you find out about renewable natural gas? How did you know to go to TrueStar to get that conversation started? Walk us through how your learning curve on this whole thing.
Sure. I met with many companies, not just in the United States, outside the United States as well, when we were going to the CNG fuel system to build our stations and help us out throughout and to learn. Again, prior to 2011, 2012, I had no idea about any of it. I'm an old diesel guy, got my first paycheck at 14 years old working on diesel vehicles. I've a long time working on diesel vehicles. When the when the task was given me, I had to research. So I broke it down. I met with tons of people and found that True Star Energy, who is now Opal, gave us the best ability to provide fuel for our fleet in our location. So we went with True Star. I learned, was educated tremendously, went to their plant, went to everything, and learned a lot. So we opened our Tamarack location in 2013, grew our fleet to 150 here in Tamarack, added more fleet, added new locations. So I say we have a place in Ocoee, Florida, right outside of Orlando. We have a fleet of vehicles up there. We were not going back to diesel. So I had to build a station in Ocoee. We're opening a place in Miami Gardens right now, adding to the fleet. We're building a station in Miami Gardens. We're opening a place in a new DC, 1,300,000 square foot DC in Plant City, Florida, which will open in July, and construction for the CNG stations underway. Our buildup with RNG was that, hey, with the True Star is, hey, there's an alternative out there besides compressed natural gas. If you really want to help out the environment, if you really want to get the right fuels into it, there's a renewable natural gas. They educated me on a renewable natural gas. I signed it. I signed the contract as soon as I understood it. And now we're out of the 1,350,000 GGE we use this year. 60% of that is renewable natural gas. 81,000 GGE of that is renewable natural gas.
I'm sure
I'm
everyone wants
pushing
to know,
to let that get 100%.
All right, how about you?
I'm sure everyone wants to know, do you pay more for that renewable natural gas than the
Yeah.
compressed natural gas?
Yes, there are. Yesterday afternoon, I met with Fred.
I don't know, Ricardo, but
I'm
no,
muted.
absolutely not. Actually, we get benefits back from that natural gas in the RINs that we were talking about before. So we're paying, I'll just give an average about a 124 to 125 per GGE right now across the board. And we're getting a substantial amount back from the RIN each this year, close to $150,000, $200,000. So actually, we're benefiting by the renewable natural gas.
Wow. So there seems to be only upside to it for you. I mean, has there been any problems whatsoever with using it?
I have not found one issue. My thoughts were, when we went from compressed natural gas, clean, nice, dry, compressed natural gas, we forget, and we started using the RNG, getting that pumped into pipeline, that there may be difficulties with the maintenance of our vehicles where it started calling faults. I haven't found one. There hasn't been a change. There hasn't been one thing that I've found negative about the RNG.
Here's a question that we'll probably have Sam and Ernie weigh in a little bit more later, but is RNG actually in your fuel tanks, or are you instead purchasing the RIN, the environmental attribute, and you actually have CNG in your tank? Do you know if that's the case?
And I don't know. I don't know who would know. We are purchasing the RIN. It's pumped into their system, into the system, and delivered to us.
Okay.
I'll ask you, Ben, could you tell if it was CNG or if it's RNG?
I know I can't.
I promise you I can't either.
Maybe let's let Ernie and Sam join in on that one.
Okay. Yeah, I'll answer that, Ben. And again, I know I had a lot of slides there and I was going pretty quickly through them. You can imagine, you have these gas treatment plants for RNG and you inject it into a pipeline, those molecules get immediately dispersed into the CNG. I mean, typically, you're putting a very small amount of RNG into a local distribution pipeline of natural gas. So the gas that David's buying is still CNG. What he is buying that RNG attribute. So he is, buying that RIN credit, and as part of that overall RFS program. So, even though the fuel is still CNG that's coming into his vehicles, he's getting the credit for the RNG that he's purchased from other parts of the country.
Thanks, Ernie. I mean, for some of our listeners, is it similar to solar energy in the sense that you generate solar on your panel and you put it on the grid, and then once it's on the grid, it's electricity, and you can't tell where it came from? Is that about the same thing?
Same thing. I mean, the kilowatt hour from a solar is equal to a kilowatt hour from a coal burning power plant, in the end. Now, obviously they have two completely different environmental consequences, a solar versus a coal plant, but in the end, the kilowatt hour is the same.
Thanks, Ernie. Thanks,
Right.
Dave. I think that's an important, I guess, nuance of RNG. Back to David, a few more questions for you, and then we'll open it up to the whole panel. Dave, so you put a lot of money into this. You're constantly moving forward. The culture of your company demands it. You're saving money on fuels. What do you think? Do you think your customers know about this, and are they and does the industry that you're in know about this? And do you feel like it is having an effect on your brand and on your business?
Our customers absolutely know about it. We do the PR. We have it on all our vehicles that we run on compressed natural gas. We on our websites, in our stores, we publicize that we're clean energy. We push our clean energy incentive to everyone. It's part of our brand. A cleaner environment is better for all of us. Has it helped in the industry? Absolutely, it helped in the industry. I go to many seminars, many trade shows and everything, and compressed natural gas is out there. There's now a push on electric, but I'm still with the CNG. But absolutely, from the time we started in 2011, 12, 13, the CNG availability of vehicles has increased dramatically. In fact, this last year, I worked with Peterbilt to develop a 100% dedicated medium duty vehicle, 537 medium duty from Pete, which has a Cummins near zero in it. And they would have never had even thought about it if the demand wasn't out there. Our regular usage for CNG historically is refuge and things like that, buses, things like that. But as far as a commercial vehicle, a medium duty vehicle, nothing was out there. So I believe, and I hope I helped a little bit by pushing and meeting with vendors and companies to say, hey, we need compressed natural gas vehicles out there, and developing and getting what we need. I believe we helped out a lot. So yeah, I'm very proud of what we've accomplished.
Thanks, David. It sounds like a real success story, and I'm glad we could end our slate of speakers with someone who's just doing it on the ground. So we went from top to bottom on this issue. So now I think we'll open it up to the panel for questions. And Sam, if you haven't already, go ahead and turn your video on. You have it. Great. So I have collected a few questions as we've gone through, and I'll start moving through them. But people who are on the line, don't be shy. You can still type your questions into the chat, and we'll insert it into the panel discussion here. But let's stick with Dave with the first question. Just a clarification, I suppose. At your various fueling locations, it sounds like you have two now. You're maybe moving into up to 4 in the near term. Do you have direct gas pipeline connections to your fueling locations where you're compressing the fuel on site, or are you getting any kind of gas deliveries via truck?
No, we have direct delivery. In Tamarack, we have through Sunrise, Miami, Gardens and Ocoee through Ocoee. So that's the thing about Florida. I mean, especially South Florida and Central Florida. The gas is available. I mean, every city has it as far as the availability of the pipelines are there. We opened the station. We got 2 compressors here in Tamarack. We're going to have 2 compressors in Miami Gardens. We have 2 compressors up in Ocoee, and it'll be 2 giant compressors in Plant City. And the gas is readily available there. There's no need to pipe it in or truck it in or anything like that. The pipelines are available, and most locations that we've yet to find a place where we built a DC or a shoulder that the gas was not readily available already.
Okay. We had a couple questions that kind of is like I guess it's sort of a scenario-based question. So assume I'm a municipality and I run landfills, I run wastewater treatment plants. And I think, shoot, I might have a feedstock here. How do I go about developing that feedstock as a municipality, developing those landfills, developing those wastewater treatment plants? How do I get into this market and generate RNG? And I guess I'll throw that to Ernie and or
Yeah,
Sam.
I would give it to Ernie or Sam because more intelligent than I.
So most cities or landfill operators, they'll do some kind of feasibility study. I mean, and I've done those before, where they look at their their landfill or wastewater plant and get a feel for how much biogas they're producing. Not every wastewater plant necessarily has anaerobic digesters at their facility. That's a kind of a secondary treatment that some do and some don't. So, if you don't have it, then obviously you got to build that in into your wastewater plant. And so you just need to have that initial feasibility study to, determine the, kind of the rough economics of, the size and of gas that you could potentially make, and, proximity to a pipeline. That's a big issue. How close to a pipeline are you? I mean, if you're having to run a pipe several miles to get there and you have to cross an interstate or something, that could kill a project. It's very expensive to do something like that. So a number of factors have to go in the initial feasibility study, but assuming that it's everything looks good, then moving forward, again, most cities, municipalities, they'll find they'll issue RFPs for project developers to come in and actually bid on and contract out for the plant itself.
Is
And then
there
you-
like a threshold of size of operation below which you probably are too small to think about this or not?
My experience, and Sam, feel free to, about 500 cubic feet a minute. Now, with a caveat, agricultural facilities, especially if they're selling into California, are way below 500, but because they get such great value with that California program, it's very economical. But for a landfill wastewater plant, if you're making 500 cubic feet a minute of biogas, you got something. It's not, 1,000 would be better. 2,000-3,000 is even obviously very economical. So
I'm going to stay on this
I
topic.
don't know
for a
if that
second
helps
here.
anybody, but
Well, we'll stay on this scenario for a second. One thing you said I thought was interesting. You made a distinction between agricultural versus landfill and wastewater treatment. It's all compressed natural. It's all gas. So what's the difference?
okay. So I didn't have it in my presentation, and I purposely excluded the California program. The California program has a different way of developing the credits. With the EPA program, every million BTUs of renewable natural gas gets the same RIN credit. With California, it's different. Agricultural has a much higher value in the California program. They have, and Sam mentioned CI several times, carbon intensity. There's actually a score for each facility. And agriculturals get these very good scores. You know, he mentioned some of them minus 300, even minus 400. And that gives you tremendous value for your gas for agricultural.
So there's
versus
something
when-
about an agricultural operation that is
That-
environmentally sort of better to harness as RNG versus the landfill and the wastewater treatment.
Yes, and it's called methane avoidance. So you can imagine if you're a farm in California and you have these lagoons where all the manure is going right now, and it's just going in the lagoon, and the methane that's, you know, coming off that lagoon is going right into the atmosphere. So, you know, there you go. You know, I mean, your major greenhouse gas emitter, you put a cover on that lagoon, you've captured all that methane that otherwise was going right into the land, right up into the atmosphere. Landfills and wastewater plants, they're highly regulated facilities. The gas has to be collected, the gas has to be flared. You don't have those kind of direct methane emissions that you do with agricultural.
Gotcha. Okay. So sticking to the idea that we're talking about a municipality, you know, how do you develop a project? You know, municipalities, you know, they have a mandate to do a lot of things. They have limited resources. How do they fund something like this? Are there developers who are waiting to kind of work a P3 with them? Are there is there federal funding for them to invest in this kind of thing? You know, can they play with the carbon credit markets to fund these kinds of projects? They're expensive, I assume. So how do they fund? How do they get something like this off the ground?
Well, actually, Ben, you kind of hit them all hit them all there. There are different, you know, Department of Energy potential funding options, but the project developer, again, that's the major stakeholder that I had. You know, as a municipality, a lot of times municipalities will, again, they'll go out, they'll have RFP packages, you know, go out for bid to get a project developer. And in most cases, the developer will pay the municipality a royalty fee. So, you know, for the municipality, they don't have the big capital outlay, the project developers putting the risk with a big capital outlay. And in return, the municipality gets a royalty fee for, you know, for their feedstock, for their biogas. And for some municipalities, that's great. I mean, here was a material, you know, here was a biogas that otherwise was, you know, having to treat and burn and, you know, flare and all the permits involved with it. Now, you know, this developer handles everything and you get paid for it. However, you know, some municipalities are a little more proactive and will build the plant themselves and handle the gas themselves and sell it to themselves, and keep the RIN to themselves. So it's just kind of obviously two different approaches.
Okay, so before we leave this topic, I want to make sure that the questioner feels like they're getting their question answered here. So feel free to unmute yourself and add any kind of follow up to that before we move on. If you feel like we've done a good job, then that's great. But here's your chance. All right, I hope we hit it. Okay, another question we have, and I think I'll throw this one to Sam. So Sam, you had something on your slide that I thought was kind of interesting. You said that, I think I've got the number, I hope I got the number right, but something like 53% of natural gas vehicle fuel use is already RNG. That's kind of shocked me. So if I don't even know it, but I am running a CNG fleet, I'm already using RNG. Is that true?
So yeah, I mean, under the renewable fuel standard, we've been incentivized since I believe 2014 to start, you know, blending this fuel into the natural gas pipeline, and then again, like we've described with the renewable energy credits, with the attributes, you know, attaching those to different fleets. So between the use of RNG in California, which is really ramped up to 100% from the LCFS program, and then the others who are doing that under the RFS only, yeah, we've reached 53%, and we just see that number continue to grow because frankly, those two programs, which you can stack those credits together, they really make a good value proposition for fleets.
So you mentioned California is 100%. The 53%, does it matter where you are in the country? Is it different in Florida than it is in other places?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think that would just be based on, who is buying the RNG, right? But the 53 is nationwide. And again, that's a product of the Renewable Fuel Standard, which is a nationwide program. So it doesn't matter, in the eyes of EPA, it doesn't matter where you dispense that natural gas fuel. It just matters that you do it in the United States and that you have a record of it. And that's, how the program compliance works.
So the
based on the
EPA
records.
program, we're learning about it here as viewers, and there's a lot to learn. But this is the program that generates the RINs, correct?
Right.
And so this market applies to only ground transportation, or does it also apply
Correct.
to rail and maritime?
Right. So RFS only applies to ground transportation right now, on road transportation. There are always talks of expanding these programs to encompass more fuels with the LCFS programs. And again, I think these are the ones to really watch. There's the option, I believe, to opt in with maritime and other uses. So, they're not covered as a mandatory compliance entity under the program, which means that, if you're an operator of a rail, locomotive, you're not required to buy credits to offset your conventional fuel use. But if you opt in, then you can, generate credits for the use of RNG or, whatever other renewable clean fuel in your locomotive or in your ship, right? So I think that's an important opportunity that it hasn't been explored as much as the NGV opportunity has, but we definitely see that as a very big market potential for the RNG industry. I think, especially in the shipping industry, there's a lot of conversation around that right now.
So
How to decarbonize maritime.
I mentioned at the outset that in North Florida, we have major activity both in rail and in shipping around LNG. And so what would you recommend for those industries in our region if they are interested in RNG? What's their next step?
Right. And I think it's a tough one right now because frankly, California, Oregon, Washington, Canada have these programs in place, which could possibly allow you to opt in and then, have a good outcome for monetizing the RNG credits and the RNG use in those fleets. In Florida, since you can't monetize that under the RFS program, there's really not a good way to do it right now other than buying, probably lowest cost RNG directly from a utility or from a marketer that's not qualifying under the transportation programs. So people are doing that. Few of the policies and sort of developments that I outlined in my presentation on the state level outside of the transportation sector, I think lend themselves to that, definitely. But I mean, ideally, right, Florida would at some point pass a low carbon fuel standard, clean fuel standard policy, which would allow the opt-in for maritime. Or we could see that federally, although that conversation is sort of stopped right now.
I see. So the play is a policy play at the state level at this stage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just want to note also, I posted in the chat CI scores from the California Air Resources Board. So I think, and I should have included a slide on this, but when we're talking about the CI scores from different projects, if you look at that link, it gives an overview of every certified energy under the California LCFS program, which we generally speak in terms of California LCFS because it's the largest market. Oregon is analogous to this, Canada is analogous to this, and Washington will be once we're finished with the regulatory implementation. But if you look at that link, what the graph really illustrates is that you can see in the bio LNG, in the bio CNG in the electricity and in the hydrogen categories, they're all highly carbon negative fuels available, and those are all based on biogenic feedstocks like biogas and other potentially other non-gaseous biogenic fuels. So just an interesting point. I think that sort of helps visualize what Ernie and I touched on, and it shows really again the unique value proposition of carbon negative bioenergy as in the transportation sector.
Okay. I want to throw it open to the whole audience here to ask any questions they might ask. I've gone through the chats. I've gone through my questions. Are there any last questions here from the group for our panel? Feel free to unmute and ask one if you wish. I'm seeing if there's any takers here. Doesn't look like it. So then I would say, Ernie, Sam, Dave, any last thoughts, any closing thoughts from you?
No, I mean, just anybody have any questions like how this would work in their municipality? I'm always open to, initial discussions on that.
Okay. Dave, any last thoughts from you?
Same with me. As an end user, I know renewable natural gas works, CNG works. We have to do something with our fleets out there. Anybody have any questions on real usage, how it affects costs, anything like that? My information's there. Please contact me.
I really appreciate the panel's time today. It was a fascinating discussion that, showed how this is a complex topic from a policy perspective and that there is lots of opportunities for innovation there. It's also, detailed when it comes to the engineering and the development and deployment. But then, at the level where Dave's operating as a fleet manager, it can be easy and it can be quite beneficial. So there's a lot to, I learned a lot today. I hope that the audience learned a lot today. In closing, if you don't mind, I'm just going to remind you that we organizing this meeting are the North Florida Clean Fuels Coalition. We've been around for 10 years, supporting the development of alternative fuels in North Florida. Had a lot of success in doing that, and in the natural gas fuel space. We exist solely to support fleets and fuel providers and vehicle providers to transition to clean fuels. So we're a resource as well. We bring this webinar to you for your education. If you have questions about this program, let me know. We're going to post it to our website so you can see it afterwards. If you have ideas for additional topics that you'd like to hear about, let us know. If there's anything we can do to help you, to connect you with these great panelists today, let us know. We will help. We really appreciate you joining us today and look forward to being with you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Okay.
See you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you,
Thank
Sam.
you all.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you, guys.